Thank you very much, Dunja, for joining us on the occasion of our gala, which is our moment to gather our supporters, our allies, our friends. And it's particularly important this year in the current context that we have this moment to come together. And it's particularly important for us that you accepted our invitation to join us. The work that the ILGA-Europe team does with your team is always important, but it feels even more so at the moment, and to hear your voice around what is going on in Europe and how the pandemic is affecting everyone's human rights, but also perspective on LGBTI rights is something that we wanted to give space to. So indeed, like, that will be my first question to you. It's more than 3 months. We're getting into 4 months of the pandemic having really hit the region and the world. And we talk a lot about the health crisis and the economic crisis, but I think you'll agree that this is also a human rights crisis in many ways. So from your perspective as Commissioner for Human Rights, what has been the impact, or what is the impact of the pandemic on human rights, and including on LGBTI human rights?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure to join and to be present in discussions that are important, and the work that ILGA is courageously doing. For me, of course, it would be much better if we can all be present in person and have these discussions, but even in cyberspace, for me, it's extremely useful as well to have all these exchanges that we had in the past. This is a particular occasion, and it goes without saying that I want to stand by you and with you in this fight for equality. When it comes to pandemic, I can only say that it was very clear from the outset that the pandemic was going to have a broad impact on human rights, from the right to health, as you rightly stated, and to life, the right to education, economic and social rights in general, and everyone's political rights, including freedom of movement, I would say, assembly, right to information, private life, access to justice. When it comes to LGBTI people, LGBTI people are among the most vulnerable in this pandemic, I would say, because of discrimination and exclusion they face in general in our societies. I must also say that it has taken some time, and I think this is very important. It has taken some time for the impact of COVID-19 on LGBTI people to be recognized by all of us and to be acknowledged. It was not very visible at the very beginning. And I want to take this opportunity to pay a tribute to the work of LGBTI activists, numerous NGOs, including ILGA-Europe, who have collected first of all, valuable and factual information about what was happening. So it was easier for me and for many others dealing with these issues to act, react, and move forward. And I heard that government officials dealing with LGBTI issues in several Council of Europe member states have also reached out to their national LGBTI NGOs to better understand the impact of the pandemic on the LGBTI community, and this is something that I find very important. There were numerous statements that I issued during pandemic. I will just mention briefly 15th of May, joint statement that you are aware of with the UN independent experts on SOGI and other human rights experts, alerting states also and calling them to take into account the needs of LGBTI people when designing their response to pandemic. But what I would like to mention in particular, when it comes to LGBTI, we have seen that LGBTI people face increased domestic violence, homelessness, poverty, risk of harassment in the context of curfews and restrictions of movement. So these are like specific issues that I would like to mention. And also rainbow families were sometimes separated because of the lack of legal recognition of their ties. Access to health and treatment was compromised at the same time. And the situation of trans people in some countries was so dire, it became a question of survival. So there are many other issues that I can mention, but of course, for this occasion, these are particular ones that I would like to highlight. And they are part of our monitoring and also communication with many of you during this 3 months of unprecedented time, when we actually realized how important it is also to stay in touch and to have these connections in order to be able to react.
Mm-hmm. No, and I mean, I think everything you're naming is obviously what we see, and at the same, like, we're in the moment where many of our countries, right, in Europe are emerging out of the immediate sanitary crisis, if you want, and we're all starting to assess the longer term impact of the pandemic, and also is I think the time to decide what the next phase is going to be like. You've named a lot of, I mean, there are lots of issues that affect LGBTI people that were there before. They've been made more acute because of the pandemic. How do we move forward? And I think, what are particular issues that maybe concern you as we're seeing governments move into the post-lockdown phase? From a human rights perspective, what do we need to be really alert to at the moment?
Well, as Commissioner for Human Rights, I want to make one thing very clear. A lot of suffering we just discussed could have been avoided or mitigated if member states had invested in protecting the rights of people concerned, including LGBTI people, well before the COVID-19 crisis began. This realization must be, in a way, and in my view, our compass for the post-COVID-19 recovery. We can no longer procrastinate in realizing human rights for all. We need more than ever more equality. And we need a renewed commitment from the states to strengthen the place of human rights in our societies. And this is not just, empty words or just words on paper that we are sometimes so very proud of, and we say, okay, look, we have all these wonderful documents, resolutions. No, we have to make it work. We need to be more proactive, all of us together, in order really to make sure that this recovery period is not just going back to normal and forgetting the old problems that we had in the past. This is not going to be easy, that's for sure, because the trends have not been going in the right direction in Europe, as you know, over the past few years. This is not new. I have raised the alarm on several occasions about states turning their back to human rights. Across Europe, we see a rise of our populist politicians, increasingly polarized societies, and rejection of so-called other, most frequently targeted at minority groups that have long suffered from discrimination. And this is, of course, including LGBTI people. In just the past year, I examined hate speech, intolerance against LGBTI people during a number of my country visits that you are aware of, including the role of religious leaders and a virulent anti-gender movement, so-called anti-gender movements, and anti-LGBTI declarations and high-level politicians manipulating hate to gain votes. This is happening as we speak, unfortunately, and these are extremely worrying developments. And I would say dangerous, embarrassing developments in 21st century. Trans people are also caught in a storm of fear-mongering or see their right to legal gender recognition denied. Sexuality education. So pride marches have been banned or attacked in several states. So there are more information about really moving back than moving forward. And this is also a clear sign that we need to more than ever, we will need to be organized and resolute to defend rights. And civil society, of course, plays a critical role here. LGBTI NGOs can help give a voice to victims. They collect data. I mean, you collect this data that I already mentioned, denounce violations, and sometimes we do this together. You speak truth to power and push for progress. And when it comes to this, my voice will always be joining your voice and voices on this. And to be able to do this, however, LGBTI human rights defenders must be protected. And many of them face mounting harassment, as you know. And second, they must have enough means to do their work, which is also an issue I would like to raise during this conversation.
Yeah, and I think I'll pick up on this because what's going in my head is the list of things to do. The work is immense and it's only gone longer. The burden that LGBTI organizations, like many other civil society, face is even heavier at the moment. And I know the two of us have talked about in the past how we mobilize more resources, more funding, because part of the inequality is also in terms of means, that many LGBTI groups at all levels really do not have all of the same kind of funding and resources that many others have. We don't have access to the same powers. But I guess there's a real worry at the moment, not because we're already seeing funding decreasing for civil society. And I guess it's almost like, what would be your advice on how we make the case for why we need more resources?
I mean, I think there are many issues that are part of this discussion, and there are many reasons for and actual facts to make a case. I've been aware of this problem for quite some time, as you stated, and it is really based not only on data, on information I receive. I have had the opportunity to meet LGBTI activists at a round table with human rights defenders, which I organized in Finland. Then many meetings during my country visits in the past 2 years, and also ILGA-Europe annual conference in Prague last year, which was extremely successful. But for me and for my team, it was particularly important because of the information we received and the talks I have with actual people going through a very difficult time. And the issue of lack of funding came up on almost all of these occasions. And the questions were, how many are working on a voluntary basis? How many are thoroughly exhausted, combining normal jobs and their engagement when it comes to the work on human rights? And activists, explained to me that there is a tendency for quite a long period of time for donors to think that things are fine, or at least less bad for LGBTI people in Europe, and that as a consequence, funding often does not meet the levels of need here. And this is not just in relation to LGBTI. This is happening across Europe, and I think this is extremely worrying, and this is something that I intend to discuss with many interlocutors, including European Commission, and many others that are actually looking at the work of NGOs as a crucial part of the well-being of our societies. I have also read reports that some funding allocated for projects that could not be carried out because of COVID-19 has been pulled out for some NGOs, sometimes endangering their very existence. And it is quite simple. We cannot afford a weakening of the LGBTI movement in Europe, as simple as that.
Well, thank you. That was a very, very good advice and compelling case that you're just making why more resources are needed, which I know everyone who's joining us at the gala will hear loud and clear. One very brief last question. What gives you hope at the moment, Dunja?
I'm very hopeful. At the same time, I'm very optimistic person, but realistic too. So I think this is also making it easier for me to do the job I'm doing at the moment. The COVID-19 pandemic has put, in a way, into sharp light the importance of human rights for all. It had been, in a way, you know, I can say that I've been concerned for a while about the notable indifferences and apathy about human rights in our societies. So this is something that is not new just for pandemic, but a pandemic has been a wake-up call for everyone. And I have seen so very clearly that when some people are excluded or certain groups are excluded and marginalized, it's the society as a whole that is weaker. And hopefully this is also something that we learned, that all of us learned during this period. We need equality to be stronger together. And now is the moment to invest all our energy, I would say, our knowledge to build fairer, more resilient societies based on respect for human rights. And this is also, even if we realize this is probably the gravest danger that we face at this moment. So maybe this can also help. This, as I call it, COVID-19 window opening fills me with the energy and hope that we can build better societies. We must. And I also take hope in all the victories that continue to come along the way. Some call those victories just little drops. Yes, I agree, those are drops, but crucially important drops. Last year, LGBTI people in my native Sarajevo had their first ever Pride March. It was an event of joy, happiness, and celebration. And just a few years ago, this would have been something that is absolutely not even imaginable. And this year's online Tbilisi Pride, where I saw participation of an MP and an advisor to the president, which represented important political support. That is always something I'm looking for in all states where we still have a lot taboos and prejudice to face. Switzerland is making progress towards same-sex marriage, and several European states are considering banning conversion therapies, which is a topic very high on my agenda currently. And finally, it gives me hope to see that great courage and determination of LGBTI activists, my colleagues, my friends across Europe, who sometimes, in the face of grave danger, continue to stand up to oppression, harassment, humiliation, and to claim the right to full inclusion, which is their right. And if you are not defeated, if you are not afraid, I have question that I pose to myself, how could I be? And I'm not, because you give me energy, you give me hope, you give me inspiration to fight for rights. And I'm really looking forward to our future work, our struggle and our fight, and I'm very optimistic at the same time.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Dunja, for this message of hope, which I think is one that we all need dearly at the moment. So thank you very much for making time.
You.
Thank you for being there, and onwards for the work together.
Thank you, and enjoy your gala in cyberspace.
Thank you very much. Thank you.